Hello, guys, and welcome to another edition of the Pure Investments Podcast. I am your host, Kai, and I'm here with Bowen. Say hello, Bowen.
Hello, hello.
And we're just going to kind of take off from where we left last week. I believe last week we were actually right around the same spot when we recorded, around this like 7,500 to 8,000 range, if I'm not mistaken, which is coincidentally right back where we're at now. You know, I know we had been saying for the last week or two that we kind of expected this drop down to the 7,000 range right here that you see me hovering over, and that's exactly what happened last night. We hit around, I think, a low of 7,060 or so, and then we saw a nice big bounce up today. I believe we hit a high of around 7,500. So we're in a good spot. We kind of bounced right where we wanted to. I wouldn't be so shocked, though, to see something more like this, where we kind of bounce around between this little range down on this bottom line, similar to the last time we were around the 7,000 mark, where, maybe tomorrow we see, who knows, a bounce up to like 7,800, and then, a big red day afterwards, bringing us back down near 7K again.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I was watching something I thought was really interesting, which was on the 1 minute chart, actually, which is not something I use very often, ever. But I was using it on Bitcoin actually to look at the most recent price spike. And something I thought was really cool is when it hit that low line that you're referring to, and I have also drawn in my graph, it then in a period of a total of, I think, 20 minutes, rose 5%, which is pretty impressive for Bitcoin to move in such a short period of time. And I think we saw the exact same thing last time it bounced off that line. Again, we looked at it and we kind of saw it make a wedge before it bounced off the bottom line last time. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting how fast it responded to bounce off that bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it on like just a 4-hour scale, so you can kind of get an idea. You can see what he's kind of talking about here. Back on like March 31st, where we hit this line, and then the next 4-hour candle was this monster candle. And basically the same thing here. We kind of tapped this line and then one big candle right here. And we've kind of just been stuck up here since then. Now, last time this happened, we flagged around for probably almost like a full day here, being that these are 4-hour candles, before making that next little move. So, we might see something similar, like I was saying, like another move tomorrow up to like that 7,800 range before a little bit of a fall back down, which is fine. That's pretty standard. I've basically been looking at Bitcoin almost strictly on a daily scale for the past, 2 weeks since we were up at around 10K.
That's about it.
Yeah. But I mean, otherwise, every signal is pointing right where we want it to. When you see these things like this triangle line coincide with RSI at 30 and MACD, basically on this like thin line, little refresh there. On this thin line here where it could cross up at any point and stoke down at zero. Like, these are all the things you want to see out of a consolidation period. You want to see everything line up perfectly together. What you don't want to see is just all of this red that we have here and then look at the graph and be like, oh man, all of that and we're still only at 50 RSI. That means we've got a lot more to go. You know what I mean? So right now we're seeing all the indications from the indicators of being at the bottom and from the pattern of being at the bottom, and I think that is a overall good sign. Again, it could be another week. When we talk to you next week, we could be right around the same spot, like right around here, after a little bit of like up and down movement. But all in all, the signals are looking pretty good right now from it.
Yeah, I think it's also important to look at the sideways consolidation that's overall down, overall bearish, because what that leads to is the indicators getting reset. And when the indicators get reset, they can also just get reset from after that massive run up, just a little drop down. That little drop down also resets the indicators, but it only resets it for a small period of time. As soon as the then price starts to go back up again, the indicators, boom, slap all the way up to maximum. So once we start seeing it go down and sideways, this sort of consolidation, lowering the indicators, it makes it also, because of how moving averages work and such, it makes it also makes it a lot harder of a time to go back up to that high zone where they are overbought after this time period. So if we break upwards out of this, you'll see the MACD start to go upwards more slowly. The stochastics start to go upwards more slowly, RSI, etc., which I think, again, is very healthy.
And another thing I want to point out, just while I have this weekly chart open here, just something I'm kind of noticing with my eye here that I hadn't really looked at prior, is if you look, the weekly RSI is right down at like 45, which is actually a pretty healthy spot to be in.
Especially for Bitcoin.
Yeah, so basically what you were saying, though, is if we were to break up out of this triangle here, you got to look at how weekly RSI on Bitcoin has been historically. Realistically, this is the lowest RSI has been since way back in 2015.
Yeah.
So you got to look at these moves, right? So the move from $800 basically, we'll even go lower. So for the move from $500 to about $1,200, so over double, took it from about 52, 55 RSI up to around 85, right? And then similarly, you've got the move from like 900 to 3,000, yep, which is almost a 3 times move, a little bit more than 3 times move, was the same thing. It took it from 50 to around 85 RSI. The move that we're capable of from 45 RSI, which would be the lowest we've seen, is massive.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what I'm saying. And also, bringing that RSI up after this movement will take a lot more upwards growth of the actual price. Correct. Rather than if we had just dipped down, say in like 4 weeks or 3 weeks from 10,000 to where we are now. If that had happened very dramatically, if we'd gone back up, the RSI would have shot right back up, versus now, just based off of how RSI is calculated, it's actually going to have a harder time getting back into those higher ranges, which is very, very good from a technical perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, on a weekly scale, you could be talking, the potential if we did break out of this. Obviously, there'd be ebbs and flows because that's part of the market. But, we could be talking little ebbs and flows like this where you have 2 or 3 weeks of consolidation. But in general, I mean, you could be talking of months of bull run similar to last year where we break up out of this triangle and just explode upwards and, potentially still see those, crazy figures that people were talking about back in December that now kind of seem far-fetched. But those 40,000 numbers and stuff like that people were throwing around there by the end of the year, they're still definitely on the table if we break up from this and don't break down from it. Similarly, the 4,000s that people were talking about back in February are still on the table if we were to break down from this, because there is still room to move on the, on the weekly chart. So it is worth looking at both sides of that. Yeah. But, if we break up from this, there's no reason why we can't have this type of movement that we had throughout basically all of 2017 carry us from, say July of this year till July of next year of just steady growth for a year.
Yeah, and I think it's important to look at sentiment as well. Right now, because we're in a bear market, you look at the current price of Bitcoin, you go, oh, 20K? No way. That can't happen. Not possible. But when people are in a bull market, when Bitcoin's in a bull market, I remember when Bitcoin hit 10K, people are going, 20K incoming. Here we go. Like this is just the way it is. But as soon as you're in a bear market, people really do forget about that. And, people didn't expect when Bitcoin is at $1 for it to hit $100. When it was at $100, hit 1,000, et cetera. Yeah. Nobody expected to hit 10,000. Then it hit 10,000. Yeah. And so here we are at this, downwards trend. People, a lot of people are saying, sentiment-wise, giving up hope. And giving up hope is one of the best things for crypto because as soon as everyone's giving up hope, that's when it goes off.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you just look at things logically, right? From here, you only need a little bit more than 100% move. It's almost a 200% move, a little bit less. But, back in January of last year, Bitcoin was $1,000. So you got to look at it on the whole, right? Yeah. We're still 7 times what we were in January of 2017. So you have to look at it that way. We made 20 times moves throughout 2017, and we've consolidated back down, which is logical and needed to happen. There's no saying, though, that you can't go 10 times from here. Yep. If we went 20 times from 1,000, 10 times from here is reasonable. Not probable, but definitely reasonable to hit that 50,000, 75,000 mark. A lot of people were throwing around 100K when we hit 20, which was also the perfect time for, the people who do control the markets to take control there. As soon as the numbers start coming out, 100,000 for Bitcoin this year, that's when you're going to see everything collapse and people go, oh, God, this is the bubble. It's over.
Exactly. Yeah, watching sentiment is, it's so key. As soon as everybody thinks Bitcoin's going to the moon, that's when Bitcoin goes down. As soon as everybody thinks,
Yep,
no, for Bitcoin, it's all over, that's when Bitcoin goes up. One thing I
exactly.
did want to mention, just looking at your graph and something I was looking at earlier, is the MACD on the weekly.
Hmm.
That is something I think is really important to watch because we did not have a bearish cross for the longest time.
Yeah.
And once we did, we've now had this reset to where we currently are. But you notice we're lowering past that low line, which Bitcoin never goes below.
Hmm.
And if you look, it has never gone below in history, except for I think twice, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And finally, we're seeing it reset again. Like this is the indicators lining up, like we've been saying.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you've got a couple things here. There's also this squeeze momentum. You could see that even though we've had these bearish 3 weeks, this hasn't stopped. This has continued to curl up.
Yep.
We could take a look at a few other things here too. Let's see what we've got going on over here. Yeah, so there's not much to look at as far as TD sequential because there's been so much weird up and down movement, and a weekly TD sequential on something like Bitcoin is going to be a little bit tough because it's
Yeah.
so volatile.
Yeah.
Let's see what Ichimoku looks like on the weekly. So this is actually the first cross down here, which is interesting.
Yeah, and also
for
you can see
Tenkin.
that we're almost crossing to a red cloud, which would be, I do think the first time ever, which would be really interesting to see how that plays out because
Yeah.
Ichimoku is very common in stocks, but in crypto it's a lot less common, especially these alternative settings. It's again a lot less
Yeah.
common. So even if we did see a red cross on the weekly,
Hmm.
a lot of people aren't watching the weekly. A lot of people are watching the daily, and people are kind of judging the Ichimoku off of that. So
Absolutely.
I don't even know if a red cross in the cloud on the
Probably
weekly would do
not
much.
much. One thing I would point out though with things like this, so you could see here on the daily too, right? The Tenkin's about to cross below Cajun. One thing, and this is something I brought up a lot when people were throwing around the death cross and how big of a deal that was and stuff back, a couple months ago. The amount of pressure, selling pressure it takes to cause everything to turn that bearish when it was so bullish for so long is so much that eventually you have to assume that the bears will run out of steam, right? So because these indicators were so bullish for, well over a year straight, it's hard to envision how long they can stay bearish without that steam running out. And you're slowly starting to see that, I think, with this higher low pattern and this even this lower low pattern. They're fighting their battles earlier and losing them later, which is what's causing this, this pattern to form here, this nice little triangle that we have. And I just think that's something to constantly keep in the back of your mind is just as the sell-offs gets more and more, it takes more volume to do it. And as you can see here, the volume just keeps going down and down and down, which is what you actually want to see in a consolidation period. If the volume was matching this stuff over here, I'd be more worried about this current drop than I am. The fact that the volume's lower right now is fine, so long as when we do start to see big green push, we see that green volume spike. We want to see some days like this that are green. Those big volume buying days to show that, volume's coming back into the marketplace. Because I believe market wide right now, volume's just kind of low. Look at Ethereum. It's been ever since we hit that 0.12 Bitcoin, volume is just evaporated on Ethereum. Look at the volume over here from the run up, back in December to the volume over here. It's pathetic how low the volume got.
Yeah, and looking at volume, something I encounter with some stock traders is stock traders will say, well, there's no way Bitcoin can stay at the price that it is because that's unsustainable growth. And the thing about how Bitcoin works compared to stocks is Bitcoin is purely peer-to-peer trading, or, that's how the price is controlled.
Mm-hmm.
So when one person sells, they clarify a price and the other person buys at that price. It is totally possible that Bitcoin exchange hands fully until the first 100 people or whatever that had Bitcoin, again, have all of the Bitcoin, and it still is at $100,000. That is totally a possibility. Price is purely based off of the faith people have, the fundamental layers behind it. And as long as people believe in cryptocurrency, as long as people believe in this future technology that's only been around for, we have to remember it's a very new market. It's only been around for a few years, especially tradable to the average person for a few years. As long as people believe in it fundamentally, it's going to grow. And so, as you said, the volume is decreasing. You can see that the bears are starting to they're still winning, but they're winning with less big wins than they have been. And to explain that further, the low volume means that once we start seeing the volume come back, that's more people trying to move Bitcoin. Whether they're trying to buy or sell, they're trying to move it. And moving it means that they have faith in it. Because you're not going to trade something you don't have faith in. Simple as that. You want to trade something that you think is going to go up. So
Correct.
low volume shows, well, maybe less faith. But the thing is, the prices are going, getting less and less volatile, showing more faith. So it's watching the two countering sides kind of fight it out. That's really interesting. We were also talking about mining profitability. I don't know if you want to speak on that at all.
In a second, something I did want to add though to your stock market comparison, and I think this is something that's constantly not looked at when it comes to Bitcoin's value. All right, so we always say look at market cap, right? Look at market cap, because market cap is more indicative of what Bitcoin's worth. Don't look at its actual price, because whether it's $20,000, $30,000, that doesn't matter as much. But some people like to think it does, and the reason it doesn't is because unlike stocks, right? So stocks will often go through what's called a stock split, where they will take their value, say it's Apple, right? And Apple is worth $200 a share. They will take their value and they will slice it in half down to $100 a share and issue a 1-to-1 stock split. So everyone who had a share of Apple gets another share of Apple and now has 2 shares, thus lowering the price point to make the price look more appetizing for investors, but thus also increasing the market cap as the price rises continuously from there. Bitcoin doesn't have that, at least not yet, right? There's nothing like that in crypto. Bitcoin is capped at whatever it is. It's like, 16 million something coins. That's the max it can have. And that's the same for basically every coin. Even Ethereum doesn't have a theoretical max. They can keep mining it. But at the end of the day, it won't ever split. So you'll never have that split where Ethereum goes from 600 to 300 and everybody gets an extra Ethereum. That's not how it's going to work. Yeah. So that's something to keep in mind, that yes, Bitcoin could be worth $50,000, but Bitcoin being worth $50,000 is the same as Apple being worth 150.
Exactly.
And that's something to keep in mind there, is because the mass amount more shares that Apple has. If Apple never did a stock split from their, from the day they came on the market, their stock, if it were to be the same market cap right now, would probably be, I don't know, $5,000-$6,000, maybe even a little bit more than that. I'd have to do the math, but it'd be up there, you know what I mean? And people would be saying the same thing, but they're not because of those splits.
Yeah. Yep. And, we're not going to see that. And this is, like I was just saying, it's completely based off of faith. So people believe in it, it goes up. And there's no reason the price can't just keep going up as long as people believe in it. There's literally nothing standing in the way, versus, as you said, with stocks, there is something standing in the way. And what you're just saying about Apple, I think, was interesting. I was just looking at a comparison chart of the overall cryptocurrency market cap.
Yeah.
Every single crypto traded in comparison to just like Apple as a company. And, you think of, $500 billion or whatever, it's so huge, or a third as we're currently at of $1 trillion. It's so huge. That's a big market cap. Not at all compared to some of these big companies. And remember, this is an entire market compared to one single company.
Yeah. Which, it's not even close.
Yeah, we've just started. If anyone says the cryptocurrency market hasn't just started, I just think they're flat out wrong.
All right, so if we were to actually look at market cap, right? So crypto as a whole is 325 million. All right.
That's not just Bitcoin. That's every single cryptocurrency out there, which that's about
every
1/3 of which is Bitcoin.
Yep, that's every alt. That's Ethereum, Neo, whatever you want to come up with. Any coin you can imagine, if it's on coin market cap, that's included in that determination. So 325 billion. 325 billion, right? So here's Apple, right? Now Apple's obviously the most valuable company in the world, but their valuation is 923 billion. So they're worth almost $1 trillion, right? Amazon is probably also worth, about 780 billion. You probably have to go down to a company, like eBay is worth like 37 billion, right? So eBay is worth like Ethereum, basically. Yep. Bitcoin is slightly worth more than that, you know what I mean? So you have to go down to those companies, maybe like a Microsoft, to get to the level of market cap that crypto is as a whole. No, even Microsoft, 753 billion. So I've given you 3 companies right now that are worth combined 10 times more than the crypto market cap itself, and that's 3 companies on the entire stock exchange. You know what I mean? That we're not getting into the millions and millions of different companies and small caps and all this stuff. Just these little companies. So basically, if you want to look at it, Intel is 260 million. They're basically worth what crypto is worth as a whole.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's important to look at more so than, you know, the value of Bitcoin. Don't look at its dollar value when looking to invest or not. You have to look at what the overall actual value of it is. And its value as a whole is like 100 and what's the market cap of just Bitcoin right now?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I think
want to say it's like 170 or something like that, right? So, you know, you just have to look at that. 127, so 127 billion. So you have to look at that, right? It's basically, it wouldn't even be a top 10 stock, you know, let alone be worth too much, all right? Granted, yeah, I understand Bitcoin, at the moment at least, doesn't do what, say, a company like Apple or Netflix or Amazon does, obviously.
Right.
Nobody's
Right.
trying to say that.
Right.
But there is a certain point to look at where a value on something can be what that value could potentially be, right?
Yeah.
That's how venture capital works. You invest in a company at its grassroots level, you know, like a Shark Tank even, for example, where you're giving them money based on a value that they have no business having.
Right.
It's just you see the potential in the technology or whatever it is, the product that they're pitching to you, and you see the potential for the massive growth, and you're willing to take on that risk, right? And that's
Right.
basically the same thing here. Everyone
Right.
is investing in this because they see the real world potential crypto could have and how much it could do for basically every industry, logistics,
Yeah.
you know, medical, any industry you can think of, crypto could have a very large impact
Right.
on changing the entire landscape of that industry.
Right, and looking at what Bitcoin actually does as a cryptocurrency, you know, I've been an advocate of this for a while now, but Bitcoin isn't a great cryptocurrency as far as they go. But what it is the backbone of cryptocurrencies in that to buy a cryptocurrency, you're most likely to use Bitcoin to buy it, or Ethereum, second most likely.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the face. You know, the news doesn't talk about cryptocurrencies very often. That's not a very frequent thing that the news says.
Yeah.
But you do see Bitcoin in the news, which again is interesting in terms of actual functionality. Bitcoin isn't great, and that's no problem of its own. It was just the first made. And ever since, we've seen technological adaptations that have blown Bitcoin out of the water. But I do think Bitcoin at the current moment is still a good representative example of the overall market as a whole.
There's other things too, though. You know, Bitcoin
Yep.
is also the backbone for a lot of these coins. So
Yep.
a lot of these coins, the way they work is a lot of them are done on a ERC-20 contract, which is an Ethereum contract, and that's how they get the staking for their coin. But their actual product often, I'll use Poet for an example, right? So Poet has an Ethereum token, and that's their staking token, right? That's how they're going to fund their marketplace. That's how they fund their development and their business, and that's how you invest into Poet, right? So if you want to be an investor in Poet, you buy Poe, and it's the same thing as buying a share in Apple or Netflix and so on and so forth, right? But their backbone works off of Bitcoin. So their backbone, what actually, you know, what they actually use as their platform, which is, you know, what signs each piece of media that's part of their platform and keeps that signature, that's all held on Bitcoin. And the reason why is because at the moment, at least, Bitcoin is the most widely used, so it's going to be the most secure and typically the fastest. As silly as that sounds, it's not going to have the problems like, say, like an example like Neo sometimes has, or even Ethereum, where it slows down to the point where those features that you need aren't available. Bitcoin doesn't have that problem. So while Bitcoin is slower in terms of transaction time, and it costs more in terms of transaction time than an Ethereum or a Neo or any of those examples, you know, a Nano, for example, as well. What matters is the back end. And a lot of these coins still utilize Bitcoin's back end because right now there's nothing even close to replacing it.
Right. Which is why we often at Pure look at some cryptocurrencies that really don't relate to Bitcoin and look at just a completely new sort of technology because they will be the future, or at least I firmly believe that, and know some other analysts do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But for the time being, for at least, probably at least another, you know, 3 to 5 years, I don't see anything unseating Bitcoin in that regard. I could see something overtaking it in market cap, like an Ethereum. I could see something like that for sure.
Yep.
I still think the flippening is bound to happen eventually. It's just a matter of when. But as far as utilizing Bitcoin, I don't think it's going away anytime soon. Not until something can prove to be, both faster and more economical and more used.
Yeah.
Nothing does the amount of transactions and has the amount of mining
Right.
power that Bitcoin does, and
Well,
that's going to take a lot to change.
in addition to what you said, not just all of those things have to be changed, but also even if something did come along that was superior in Bitcoin in all of those ways, Bitcoin is already implemented in so many different cryptocurrencies that to have a company completely change how they make their crypto, that's going to take a lot of doing. So it's
Hmm.
not going to take a crypto that's just better than Bitcoin. It's going to take one that's a lot better and then
Yeah.
starts to slowly become more widely used. That'll then steamroll, and we're going to see some companies just fall off the face of the market because they won't be able to take it. But again,
Hmm.
like you said, this is not something that's close to coming. This is something that's a while away.
No, and like you said, it has to be something that's significantly better, right? It can't be like a 10% gain because then why even bother? They could have other issues. It needs to be something where it's like, utilizing us as your backbone will get you 10,000% more increase in traffic, profitability and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, let's give that a shot, see what happens. And then as people prove its stability, then you move over. And even then, that process is a year or two of people slowly migrating over to that and
Yeah.
slowly away from Bitcoin. So
Yeah.
first we need that technology to come about. Second, we need people to start testing it and then migrating to it and so on and so forth. So no matter what, Bitcoin is here to stay. As long as crypto's here to stay, which I believe it is, Bitcoin is here to stay. At
Yep.
least for the
Absolutely.
foreseeable future. I can't imagine a world without Bitcoin for at least another 5 to 10 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
who knows where things could be by then.
Yeah. We can just rewind. Are you done or?
Yeah, I was going to jump into Bitcoin mining profitability if that's what you were
Before
going
we
to
get
go
to
for.
mine profitability, I know we're delaying this, but I just want to look 1 second. If you wouldn't mind going to your Bitcoin graph and going to around May 6th or May 7th, May 5th to 6th, that is, you'll notice that's the height of Bitcoin's
Yep.
price. And if you go to coin market caps, the global charts, you should go down to percentage of total market capitalization based off of dominance. Sorry to make you have to
No,
reload
no, it's
here.
fine. Just out by the
But
pool
when
here,
we
so the
go
internet's a
down,
little bit slower.
I'll wait till once it loads.
Yeah.
But we'll notice once it loads that in terms of total market capitalization, which you already have open,
Here you go.
others and Bitcoin. So I just told you around May 5th or 6th. If you go to around May 5th or 6th, you'll notice that is the bottom of the dip, the bottom of where Bitcoin's dominance was.
Mm-hmm.
If we go back to the graph, or if people just remember while looking at the podcast, that was at the height of Bitcoin's price. So ever since the capitalization has started to return, we see the price go down, which again is really counterintuitive. But that shows again faith in Bitcoin. As we see the capitalization goes up, that's more money going into it, right? Even as the price goes down, people are saying, nope, looks like I want to be safe and secure right now. And they get out of their alts, as you can see by the capitalization going down, the price is going down. Even as Bitcoin goes down, we're still seeing the amount of money going into it going up, which is, I think something that's really interesting to watch.
Yeah, and again, that pattern that we pointed out last time too, right? Like
Yep.
with the higher lows on the alts, I
Yep.
still kind of expect that to keep maintaining as well.
Yeah, we're eventually going to see a cross there. We saw, if you want to enable Ethereum on that graph, we saw the cross of others in Ethereum, which is really cool to watch, where they intersected for a second. Others took over, Ethereum and others both went up, and then boom, others just went off as Ethereum continued to dwindle a little bit. I think we're just going to see others keeping going up until eventually reach a stagnation point. But we're going to see some other major players who, instead of being these major players who are just high market cap, they're high functionality. And these high
Yeah.
functionality players will continue to take over the market cap slow and steadily.
Yeah, I mean, at this point too, also, I would say that, all we've ever talked about with the flippening is Bitcoin and Ethereum flipping. And on this chart, I think the real flippening that's going to happen, possibly even in the next 2 or 3 months, is going to be the others taking over Bitcoin's dominance. It keeps getting closer and closer. Not quite the closest of that peak of Ethereum, which got to I want to say 32% or so. But if we have another alt season soon, which looking through certain alt charts leads me to believe it is soon.
Yeah, lots of bottomed out charts.
yeah, a lot of these alts are very bottomed out, and it's looking very similar to the patterns that I've shown in the past in other podcasts with August and all that stuff before this last big altcoin run. I would say that it's very plausible that we see others overtake Bitcoin, and Bitcoin for the first time ever lose that that market dominance, which I think is possibly bad for Bitcoin from a perspective of like extreme bull runs like we've seen in past years. I don't think that means it's out of the realm of possibility to hit that like 40, 50,000. I do think those people who thought we'd hit like 300,000 are going to be kind of upset. But I do think that what it'll happen is you'll see less reliance on Bitcoin when it comes to alts. And what I mean by that is anytime, you see Bitcoin make some form of volatile move, alts follow, right? So like we were saying, right, that May 5th, 6th point was the 10,000 peak. Well, let's just go to, my main man Poe here as an example. And, May 3rd was the peak here at like 670 sats. Yeah. And since then it's dropped down along with Bitcoin. And, you can look across the market and see that on just about any one of these coins. Some have survived it like ONT and TRX, which are just kind of, bull flagging around. But the majority of them all look similar to the Poe chart, where you had this huge peak right around that early May, right with Bitcoin, and then this big dump off. And I think we could slowly begin to see that stop and alts begin to maintain their values better, similar to how TRX and ONT have over the span. And by virtue of that, we'll see hopefully a healthier marketplace. Yeah. Right now, if you're predicting alts, you have to be predicting Bitcoin with them. Because if you don't know what Bitcoin's going to do, it doesn't matter what you think alts might be doing. Their TA gets thrown out the window like it's old trash as soon as Bitcoin decides what it's doing. So if you don't know what Bitcoin's doing, it doesn't matter. And what I'd like to see is a separation of that. I'd like to see alts be able to move on their own, and possibly not all alts. Maybe there's certain segments of the market that slowly develop, Like we have that section of alts that are like Ethereum, Neo, TRX, ICX, Lambda, who are all in this grouping of like trying to make a better development suite, right? A better way to develop and manage crypto. And they're all in that one section.
Cryptos.
Correct. And then we have like those logistics coins, like Track and T-Food, and there's a bunch of other ones as well. Those are just first ones off the top of my head that they could fall into their certain subsect. And then you start to see it start to become like the stock market, where you have, the medical section and the technology section and the stores, like your big box stores and stuff. And what tends to happen in the stock market, and what I hope will eventually happen here, is those sections tend to move up and down together. If it's a good day for Apple, it's probably also a good day for AMD and Intel and NVIDIA, because they all fall into that technology subset. And if it's a good day for, a health company, like a healthcare company, like Humira South or whatever, like it's also a good day for all the other ones in there. And if it's a good day for Chase, it's a good day for Bank of America and Wells Fargo and so on and so forth. And that tends to be how those markets move. And I think if we see this others movement where it goes over Bitcoin, we could start to see that come.
Yeah, one thing I would like to mention, though, is all of those are also reliant on U.S. dollar price, which is not at all volatile. You'll see U.S. dollar price change in relation to other global currency prices very slowly and very low percentage over a matter of a year compared to Bitcoin, which moves, 1,000% or whatever.
Absolutely.
So when we see altcoin price start to be less tethered with Bitcoin, I personally don't think we'll ever see it quite be as untethered as
no, I don't either.
Yeah,
I don't see completely untethered.
Right, but I do think what you're saying is absolutely true, in that we are going to start seeing the separation where Bitcoin can have a massive fall or a massive run. We can see altcoins kind of do their thing with people actually reliant on them rather than just relying on trading on them. Like you said, there's utility and there's or whatever you call them, utility, like Track.
Logistics,
logistics. How we're going to see those guys sort of have their own section, the medical section.
Yes.
And then I do think we're seeing, like what you were saying about the infrastructure of cryptocurrencies, we're actually seeing a lot of competition there, which I think is really interesting. Who is going to be the new backbone? Who is going to be the new Bitcoin / Ethereum rolled into one? We see Neos have their smart contract system and they want people to build off of it, but it's kind of complicated and doesn't have great functionality. But then we see TRX, which has, well, we don't need to talk about TRX, but then we have Tau trying to do it. Yeah, let's not even. But then we have Tau, Lambda and Tau trying to take over the entirety of exchanges, decentralized atomic swaps, Bitcoin in terms of a backbone for price, and Ethereum smart contracts. And then we're seeing, et cetera, Icon, Ion. We're seeing people try and take over the functionality.
Yep.
And this is kind of going to be a competition. It's going to be an arms race of functionality and backbone for the cryptocurrency market. So what I do think also what we're seeing right now in terms of Bitcoin price is waiting. We're seeing the market wait for the future.
Yeah. Also bear in mind, one of those doesn't have to win out, right? Like there's thousands, like not thousands, but just like there's like 100 different banks throughout the world, there can be a vast majority of logistics cryptos that all have their own specialty. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's not, I the biggest thing I see in crypto, right, is Ethereum's dead. Neo, long live Neo. Well, no, why does Ethereum have to be dead for Neo to be successful?
Exactly.
That's asinine. There's more than enough of the pie to go around. At the end of the day, we still only have like 0.5% of the world even trading crypto, right? So the adoption just isn't there yet. But as the adoption grows, there's no reason for it to have to be a one or none. You can have all of these being wide successes, some more so than others, obviously. You're going to have an Apple versus having a Microsoft. So they're going to be, a little bit separate, but you could still have all of these companies. You know what I mean? There's a big enough piece for the pie. But I think that's about all I've got. Do you have anything else that you wanted to go over?
Mining profitability, we can quickly mention, but past that, I think I'm good.
All right. So mining profitability. What we mean by that is not, if I buy this miner, how profitable is it? What we mean by that is, there's a cost inherent to mining that's not just the cost of buying the mining rig, but also the cost of the electricity that runs those rigs, right? And the amount of people that you have to pay to manage these giant warehouses people are mining in that are basically responsible for the majority of at least Bitcoin's mining. Maybe not so much like Ethereum and Litecoin and some of those smaller ones, but Bitcoin's the only one that really matters in that grand scheme, right? If Litecoin's mining profitability were to die off, I don't think it would really affect anyone. You would just see Litecoin slowly wither away, but that's not a big deal. Bitcoin is what really matters, right? So right now, depending on which country you're in and the cost of your electricity, mining profitability is somewhere in that $7,000 to $8,000 range, meaning Bitcoin has to stay above that price for it to continue to be profitable for people to mine. Now, could we drop under that price for a month or two and people still mine? Sure, probably not an issue, right? Most people would assume, it'll come back, it's not a big deal, we'll eat the difference for now. But if we were to fall below that for a long period of time, it would almost be impossible to stay down there, because what would eventually happen is that people would start turning off their miners, which would have some pretty adverse effects. And that's obviously a doomsday scenario. But, if you want it laid out, basically, if we were to say drop down to, some people have thrown out $2,000 as just an example, which I think is ridiculous. But say we did drop back to 2,000, right? So now you're $6,000 under that profitable window. All right. So people are actually paying to mine Bitcoin as opposed to being paid. So what ends up happening is people flick off their miners, which ends up causing Bitcoin to increase in the amount of time it takes to run transactions, which also increases the cost per transaction. And that would just keep getting worse because more and more people would stop mining, which would keep increasing it until basically it became unsustainable. All right. So that's the doomsday scenario, right? You'd basically be killing Bitcoin off by doing that. It'd take a lot of work. It would take a lot of bearish mentality to get it done. And I don't see it being possible. Yeah. But also, it's tough to even stay in this window, right? Because miners aren't really making any money right now. They're kind of just running on even and hoping that things pan out better. All right, so if you're in that $7,000 to $8,000 range, right, the problem becomes that you're not really making money as a miner. Now, again, similar to being below that range, it's not really the end of the world, so long as it's not for a long period of time, right? We're not going to be able to last at a year at this range for a multitude of reasons. For one, in a year, Bitcoin does its split, and it causes profitability to drop in half. So Bitcoin has to rise in order to keep that profitability in that realm. You know what I mean? If Bitcoin's mining profitability drops when that cut comes up, that's the mining block cut, right? So I think right now you get like 3 Bitcoin per block found. So that gets cut in half come next year. I want to say in June. So you can't really stay in this range for too long. Otherwise, when that cut comes, well, now Bitcoin's mining profitability is more like 15,000.
Yeah.
You know, and now all of a sudden we're at 8,000 and still nobody's made any money off of it. All right. So that's the big thing to keep in mind. We basically have to move up over time. If Bitcoin doesn't continue to see stable growth through the marketplace, it causes problems for the miners. And that's the big point to just take away from that, is that the miners do hold a lot more power than people give them credit for.
Yeah.
And I think that we won't see too much more of this sideways movement. I would fully anticipate right now that when we break this triangle, you know, in mid to late July, most likely, possibly early August, if we want to go all the way to the end of it, which I don't think it will, you know, that'll be the last of this bear market, and we should see the next bull wave. That's my current assumption, at least, based off.
I just want to say, even if we did go down to like 5K or something, miners are still going to be there. They're still going to be mining because that's what they've been doing, and they will continue to do, and they've made profit.
Until they start losing too much money, they will keep mining because they know the potential is there.
Because miners are some of the biggest believers in the fundamental aspects. So as long as they keep believing, they're going to keep doing it.
Absolutely.
But as long as it doesn't go too low, we're not trying to say anything doomsday here. We're just trying to look at all the different options.
Yep. But that'll do it for this week, guys. So I've been Kai. That's been Bowen. And we'll see you guys next week. All right. Have a good one.